Hello everyone and welcome to this, the Apple Choral Chill playlist show hosted by VOCES8. My name is Barnaby Smith and I'm the Artistic Director and Countertenor in VOCES8 and I'm delighted to be your host for this two-part series. A special welcome to those people who tuned in yesterday for part one. This is part two today. If you missed part one yesterday, then you can catch up with that on our YouTube and Facebook channels. So it's lovely to be here with you again. Now, as I said yesterday, this show was devised because VOCES8 was invited to curate the Apple Music Choral Chill playlist. And in order to promote great choral music and our collaboration with Apple, we're bringing you this two-part show, of course, to draw your attention to the brilliant playlist, which you can find on Apple Music. And there'll be a link coming shortly in the chats and also a link in the post at the end of this show if you'd like to go and explore that fantastic 50-track playlist for yourself. So many gems in there. Now, as well as playing you some of the highlight tracks from the playlist today, I'm also going to be catching up with some of the singers, directors and composers from these recordings, and they're going to give you a lot of nice insight into how they made these tracks and some of the other interesting sort of behind the scenes looks that you might be after. So plenty to look forward to. It's a live show today, so we'd love to interact with you, and you can put your comments on the threads. Of course, if you've got something to say about the music, if you perhaps have a special story linked to one of these pieces or some insights of your own, or if you've got a question to answer, then please stick that on the thread and we'll be really pleased to interact with you in that way. I'm kind of thinking of this stream as a kind of quasi-radio show. Of course, I'll be delighted if you want to sit here and give me your undivided attention for the next hour or two, but also, of course, feel free to stick us on as the backing track to your afternoon. And much like the show yesterday, you'll be able to catch up at your convenience with this show as well on Facebook and YouTube after the event. Now, at the beginning of this stream, I played Underneath the Stars by Kate Rusby, which was arranged by our arranger-in-residence, Jim Clements, and of course performed by VOCES8. It's one of our fans' favourites, and you can find that track on the Apple Choral Chill playlist. The music I'm going to play today is a mixture of repertoire, some of which I think you'll know, absolutely guaranteed. If you're into your choral music, you'll definitely know some of the tracks. But I hope also that we found some music that perhaps you might not have come across before, so broadening your horizons slightly as well. My next track is by a group I'm sure you will all know, but I'm not actually sure you're going to know the piece that they're going to be singing. So let's find out. Thanks very much for joining me today, Harry. And first of all, I think congratulations are in order, because I believe the 16 has recently celebrated its 40th anniversary, which is, of course, quite an achievement for the organisation, but perhaps almost more of an achievement for you as the founder. So I hope you're very proud, and an incredible legacy you leave as well with all the recordings that you've made across the years. I was going to ask you first, actually, if you know how many discs it is that you've made in those 40 years.
Oh, wow, Barney. I think it's getting on for 160. Probably now.
Really?
Yeah, because we recorded in the old days, we were recording for Hyperion. In the big heyday of the CD, we were recording for Hyperion, Chandos, Virgin Classics, Collins Classics. It was brilliant. And
that's prolific.
Now we've got our own label, and that's even better.
I suppose that the group's lived through the real boom of the CD age, hasn't it? So you kind of caught the wave and surfed it, didn't you? But I mean, I know that from my perspective, growing up, your recordings have been very important. And I was actually taught in my formative years by a member of your ensemble, Tim Jones. And so I was always hugely proud whenever a new 16 CD came out, because I could buy it and go and say to my mum and dad and all my friends, look, my singing teacher's on the CD. So it's always been a very important ensemble to me for many reasons, that included.
Oh,
now, the track I've chosen today for the Choral Chill playlist is a choice actually that was informed from hearing you speak recently on a new podcast that you're involved with called Choral Chihuahua, which everybody should go and check out if they can. And you do that with your associate conductor, Eamon Dugan, and of course, Ifagilini's director, Robert Hollingworth, who we're going to be hearing from later on this show. And I say it was informed by that conversation because originally I was going to choose your recording of Nesien's Marta by Jean Mouton, which is quite a famous piece. I think many people will know it. But having heard you speak on your podcast, you recounted a story of recording some music from the Eton Choir book in the very early days of the 16. And you said that you did that recording in St Anne and St Agnes Church in London, which is now the VOCES8 Centre. So obviously there's a nice tie there. But I was also very energized because you talked with such passion about the music of the Eton Choir book, which is actually a part of the repertoire that I personally have not spent very much time investigating, either as a singer or a director. So you inspired me to go and check it out properly. And because of this conversation, when I typed in Nesien's Marta and 16 to look for the Mouton, I found an Eton Choir book version, a setting that was done of the same text by Walter Lamb. So I'd love to talk about that in a minute. But first I wanted to speak to you a little bit about something else you said in the same interview, which was talking about how important you believe that family feeling that you have in the 16 has been to your success. You talked about the longevity of the membership, a feeling of togetherness and friendship. And I wondered how much credit you give to the success, I suppose, over a 40-year period, and also to the success of your general singing concert presentations based on that ethos that you have within the organisation. I wondered if you could talk about that for a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, when it all started, it was a group of friends. I think what was interesting, actually, though, when I formed it 40 years ago was that it was friends, but they were some older, some younger, some from Oxford, some from Cambridge, some people I'd met from Canterbury. But they gelled. And when I look back on that later, it was Sarah Moore Peach when I did a book with her, and she kept on digging at questions for me and saying, well, how did this really happen? I began to think about it and actually think I was looking for personalities, I was looking for characters, and I wanted to put all those people together and make them gel. And it has, as you say, Barney, it's become a real family, and that's really what's kept it together, because for a group to survive over 40 years, there are going to be many downtimes as well as a lot of great times. And I think because I certainly am very loyal to them, and they're likewise very loyal to me. So in those darker times, they helped me pull through it all. And now, well, apart from at the moment, but I mean, we've had a great 40th anniversary year last year, and people in the group, I've often said they're either there for one concert or they're there for the next 10 years or so. Yeah. And that is exactly what's happened. You know exactly who's going to fit and who's not going to fit almost instantly. And it's been a blend of, people who have come out of university, spent 10 years with us and have gone on to glittering solo careers, and like the likes of Carolyn Sampson, yes, Mark Hamill, Chris Purvis have been some really fantastic singers. And I've been very much one to encourage that and say to them, look, if it's not going to work, there's always going to be a place for you when you come back. But luckily for them, it's worked, and that's great. But that also keeps the older part of the group on their toes when the youngsters come in, and then the youngsters learn from the older guys, we hope.
It must make for a very nice working environment. I imagine also that when you're on the concert platform, I know this from my own directing, when you look out and you don't just see singers and musicians, but you actually see friends, you kind of get a special connection. I think that really shows in your...
Yeah, it's a wonderful feeling, that. And I don't know what you feel when you're in a concert hall and you've got audience behind and in front. That's not so good, is it? Because you can't, there's a little bit of, you can't actually be yourself. Because actually the 16, particularly in choral pilgrimage concerts, when we do it sort of 30 odd times around the country, you've got to keep that alive, so that there's a lot of fun that's going on there, which keeps the singers really active, and also realizing that actually I don't necessarily do the same thing twice, and so they've got to be alert.
Well, that sense of fun is something that we look for. It's a careful balancing act in VOCES8, because as you say, once you've performed a piece 25, 30 times, you're so at home with it that you can begin to be very much in the moment and have a good time. It's a careful balancing act for us. Now, you talk about music and doing it for a long time. The Eton Choir book, as I said earlier, is something you said you've been looking at for your whole 40 years. So this particular piece, Nesien's Marta, is it something that's been in the repertoire a long time?
It has. I think it's on a very early Hyperion disc, actually, LP in those days. And I do. It's, as you say, Eton Choir book been very much part of our lives. It's one of the shorter pieces, actually, which is good, because I mean most of those antiphons in the Eton Choir book last about 15, 16 minutes, and they're incredibly complex. I love the Lamb. He was at Windsor, St George's Windsor. He's one of the few composers in the Eton Choir book actually we know something about. There's another composer called John Brown who probably wrote most of the pieces in the choir book. We know nothing about him whatsoever. But the Lamb is beautifully set. I think it's got two tenor parts, which again is slightly unusual in the Eton Choir book. Sort of lower voice tessitura, which gives it a fantastic sonority. But they're beautiful, complex pieces, and a lot changed from the sort of 1500s to the 1600s. So this piece was written, I suppose, Kierkegaard, 1480, something like that.
Okay, and if there were people out there who, like me, have not been immersed as much as you in this type of repertoire before, is there a particular 16 CD that you would point them to go and experience the repertoire?
I think, well, maybe actually the most recent one, Enduring Voice, has a big piece from the Eton Choir book on it by Wilkinson that will give people a really good idea of the complexity of the music, set alongside things of more modern times as well, so they can see, the trajectory. And actually, composers like James McMillan and Gabriel Jackson are fascinated by Eton Choir book and love its complexity. I mean, the thing about it, actually back in the 1500s, they must have been incredible singers, because the music is complex, it's tricky, it's stretched. The ranges are enormous sometimes, and they didn't have the, electric light. They didn't have a score that we can see every single part in and know what's happening around it. They were just looking at their own part on a choir book by candlelight. No markings for breaths, no rings for a wrong note, or look out here. Just fantastic.
Well, you guys make it sound very easy. So it's one of the reasons actually why in VOCES8 we haven't taken too much of it on, because it is complex stuff. But I think it would be a nice challenge for us to at some point. But as I say, you make it sound very easy. So thank you very much. And thank you for all your hard work over the last 40 years. And of course, we look forward to hearing so much more from you and your fantastic ensemble. So thanks so much for joining us today. And here is Nesien's Marta by La. Thank you very much to Harry Christophers for being so generous with his time and joining us there, bringing with him the music of his ensemble, the 16. Fantastic 40-year history, 160 CDs. That is an absolutely huge amount. I think if VOCES8 were maybe reaching about our 15th, so not even 10% of the legacy that Harry's leaving behind. And of course, he's uncovered so many gems of our choral music heritage, not just with the Eton Choir Book, but across so many genres of music and commissioning music as well. So we're very, very grateful to him. And we wish the 16 all the very best as they tackle what is a very difficult period that we're all currently enduring. Talking of difficult periods, my next guest is from the Twin Cities in Minnesota, and I've seen Cindy writing. Cindy's one of our regular guests here on these streams. I've seen her writing about some of the difficulties that they're having there in the Twin Cities at the moment. So we're very thankful to Jake Runestad, composer, for being able to find a little bit of time to talk to us about our next piece. So here we have composer extraordinaire, Jake Runestad. Very nice to see you, Jake. Thanks very much as well for coming on our live from home interview a few weeks ago. I think I've learned how to say your name. Did I get it right?
Runestad, yeah.
Yeah, okay, that's pretty close.
Yeah, great to be here. Great to see you too, Barney.
Well, look, you've had a rapid rise to choral music fame in the last few years, to the point that you wrote the big commission for the ACDA Brock Commission last year. You've just had a CD completely of your music recorded by one of the finest choirs in America. I wonder if you could just enlighten us a little bit, because I imagine, when all the pieces that you wrote to get you to where you are now, certainly a lot of them would have been written in a time where you didn't have so much pressure and so many time constraints on your schedule. And so you would have had a lot more, maybe a feeling of freedom when you were trying to be creative. And now that you are in such demand, there must be a feeling of deadline and having to meet things and delivering important commissions all the time. And I wonder, has that had an impact on your ability to write? And have you had to work in any way in order to fit that all in and rise to the challenge?
Yeah. Well, first of all, deadlines are crucial. If I wouldn't get anything done if I didn't have deadlines.
Okay.
So
I'm the same. I've got to have a deadline to get it done.
Those are absolutely important. And so, yeah, that's a big part of it. Another part is I'm really careful with the amount of work that I take on. And over time, I've really figured out, okay, I know that I can budget about this much writing time throughout the year. And so I'm really careful that I don't burn out. Yeah. I don't want to turn into a composer that writes the same piece over and over again, because there's no time to like invent and to be really creative. So I'm really careful with the amount of projects that I take on. And I have a pretty good work ethic. And so it's just engaging deeply with what I do and budgeting the right amount of time. And that doesn't mean that, there are some last minute efforts to write music close to the deadline.
Do you find that when you say, let's say I asked you to write a piece now, you might think, well, that's probably a week of writing time. Would you then say in your diary, I'm actually going to leave 2 weeks for that, in case you get some sort of block or you're feeling low for whatever reason or not particularly creative? Do you give yourself that extra buffer?
Yeah. Usually it's much longer than that. Even for a short piece, I'll budget a month.
Okay.
Because for me, most of my time is in processing. I take a long time, if it's choral music, finding the right text and doing a lot of research around that text. So I'm informing myself about who wrote it, what are the cultural implications of the meaning, of the interpretation, what was going on in the world at that time, how all of that influences what this text is saying, so that when it comes time to writing, all of that is filtered through what I've internalized, so that I think that I can try and give as much authentic voice to the text as I can.
That's magnificent. Well, you're very, very good at it.
Thank you.
We sing your piece, Let My Love Be Heard, and actually that's on this Choral Chill playlist. But it's not going to be the track that we feature today, but it really touches audiences wherever we go. And you have it's one of those pieces that people come up to us and they're like, Let My Love Be Heard was absolutely magnificent. So you've obviously found a magic ingredient, which is very, very exciting. I'm no surprise that, of course, you're in demand as a composer. You know, it's funny that there's the story about a famous English vocal group that's not around anymore. They'll remain nameless. That they thought they were too busy, and so they thought what they'd do would be double their price overnight. It's doubled their price, thinking that they'd get half the amount of work. And of course, what happened? They got double the amount of offers of work. So it's it just goes to show that, you know, managing the schedule is a really difficult thing to do. And kudos to you for putting that at the forefront of your work. I think it's very evident. So the piece we're going to play is Waves, and it comes from an album that is completely made up of your music, completely compiled of your music by Conspirare, conducted by Craig Heller-Johnson. So coming back to this idea, first of all, about writing, how much of that music was already composed when you took this project on, and how much of it did you write for the disc?
All of it existed.
Okay.
The last track on the album, Flower into Kindness, I adapted from a larger work for choir and orchestra, and I made it work for string quartet and choir. But everything else existed. One of the pieces, Come to the Woods, which is part of the American triptych, was commissioned by Conspirare.
Okay.
But yeah, everything else existed. So
what did the process look like then? Did Craig come to you and suggest that he'd like to make a CD, and were you involved at all in the playlisting of that, or was this a kind of Craig project through and through?
Yeah, we had a conversation years ago about wanting to do the disc. And so then, since then, it was a matter of finding the right time, finding, you know, all of the funding in order to make it happen. And so we were in close communication about what would be included. So I sent him like my ideas about here's what I think would be good, and then he went through my music and said, yeah, okay, like what about this piece? And so it was his idea to open the disc with Waves. Okay. And so that's the recording we're going to play today. And then kind of the crux of the disc are two larger works, one called American Triptych, which is choir and piano, about 25 minutes, 3 movements. And then the title of the disc, which is The Hope of Loving, which is with string quartet, soloists, and choir, running about 15 minutes or so. But yeah, Waves kind of sets us in motion for the piece.
Yeah, that's what it says in the tin. But what do you want to tell us a little bit about the background and the piece before we play it?
Sure, yeah. So this was my first collaboration with poet Todd Boss, who is one of my dear friends and is a phenomenal poet. And we've collaborated quite a bit since then. But I remember sitting at a cafe here in Minneapolis with him because we decided we wanted to collaborate. And then he was asking me a lot of questions about what makes a good text for music, because it's not the same thing as writing poetry. You know, the text has to have a certain clarity to it. You know, we have to be careful with consonant clusters that are difficult to sing, open vowels, things like that. So we spent a long time talking about that. And then I had this commission from California State University, Fullerton, and Rob Eistad commissioned me for a piece. And so I decided that this would be the one that Todd and I could work on. So I actually asked the choir some various questions in a form and got responses, and that helped to inform the writing of the piece. Being that they're close to the, you know, closer than I am to the ocean, and kind of what it means to go there and look out on it. And so Todd's text is really one who's struggling with something in life, walks out and looks on this vast body of water and tries to find meaning in that vastness and maybe the greatness in front of you, but how small you might feel in that context.
Wow. Okay, so powerful stuff. And it starts. There's a solo in it, isn't there?
Yeah.
Now, who sings the solo?
Yeah, Mike Jones.
I thought it was Mike Jones.
It's incredible.
Yeah, I thought it was Mike. I could tell, actually. Mike's a friend of ours, and it's when he started singing, I was like, I think that's Mike Jones. But of course, I don't have the CD booklet, so I couldn't tell.
Right. Yeah, he's just phenomenal. And the pieces for double choir and piano and tenor solo. And so for me, this concept of waves, there are these washes back and forth with the choir, and then in the opening, Mike is just so delicately and beautifully soaring over the top of it. They just sound great. So I'm really, really proud of the work they did.
You've whetted our appetites now. So We'll say thank you very much for joining us, and we will go and enjoy your art. So this
My
is
pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jake. And this is Waves. gorgeous singing there from Conspirare and Mike Jones, a great friend Mike Jones, conducted by Craig Heller Johnson. We of course wish Jake and all the residents of the Twin Cities all the very best at this difficult time. It's exciting to see that we have such a global audience today. I can see people logging in from all corners of the world. Some lovely spots in Europe, the French Riviera, someone said. Good wine and nice sunshine there, I can tell you that for sure. We've got guests from Asia, Australasia, all the way from Australia, and of course America, and it's so good that you can all join us. Now, those of you who've been logging into our Live from Home campaign regularly will know that for the past 10 weeks we have been providing something for you all at 2 p.m. every day here on our socials. We hope to help everybody through this difficult period of lockdown. I'm really excited to tell you that from this coming week, we're going to be slightly changing how we come and interact with you here on social media. Our focus now is beginning to turn to how our post-COVID world might look. And so next week, we're taking the opportunity to host 3 exciting events. One is an album launch that marks the release of the final EP of VOCES8's After Silence album. That's called After Silence Elemental. And that will be hosted by me here on Facebook and YouTube next Friday, the 5th of June. It was a really successful event when we hosted it for the 3rd EP, so I'll be bringing you another event in a similar style. On the 7th of June, we'll be hosting a stream from London to mark the end of the culmination, I should say, of our Singing Brussels project. That's something where you can all come along and sing with us. But on the 4th of June, we're going to try our first streaming our first show with more than one of us in the room. Of course, we will be socially distanced, and this show will take the form of a digital concert experience with myself, Andrea and Blake from VOCES8, and my brother Paul. It's going to be called Lullabies in Space and Time, and it's going to be a ticketed event. And of course, we would hugely value your support as we try to forge a new way of bringing live music to you in your homes. This event is designed actually to be a stepping stone towards bringing all of the 8 singers from VOCES8 back into the same room in a safe way, so of course we can sing for you live again as an ensemble. So please come and support that event if you can. I'm going to put a ticket link in the chat threads for you now, and we would be hugely grateful for any support you could give us. And now our next artist is part of the VOCES8 Foundation, so we hope that you'll be hearing from them live soon as well from the VOCES8 Centre in London. But for now, let's hear some of their glorious music, and I spoke to their director, Claire Stewart. Joined now by Claire Stewart from the vocal group Apollo 5, which is actually part of the VOCES8 Foundation. So it's very nice to see you, Claire. It's not normally this amount of time between us actually seeing each other in person, so it's nice to catch up. And
nice to see you, Bob.
I know that you are celebrating your 10th anniversary coming up.
We are, yes. Very excited to be 10 years of Apollo 5. It's a real landmark, so we're celebrating this year as best we can.
And you, as part of that, you have an album project. So do you want to just tell us a little bit about that?
Sure, yes. As a sort of celebration of our 10th anniversary, we've recorded 3 digital EPs, and these 3 EPs will go to form the album called Where All Roses Go, and we released the first volume last month in April.
You did. And talking about Where All Roses Go, are there any roses in that lovely bunch of flowers you got there?
I've actually I've just done a cull. Some of them were looking a little less happy, so the roses have gone, sadly, but
yes,
they were
going Where All Roses actually go.
Where all roses went in my bin.
Okay, great. And the piece we're going to play of yours, I mean, Apollo 5 has a really eclectic range of repertoire. Just tell us, on that first EP, or what are the actual pieces on the first EP?
So we've got some polyphony. We've got an amazing piece by Francisco Guerrero, and we also have a piece by William Byrd, quite well known in the choral repertoire. We also have a favourite for choirs all over the world by Whitaker, This Marriage, which is a beautiful blessing. We also have a folk song, a Japanese folk song arrangement written by Paul Smith.
That's also on the playlist, isn't it?
It is on the playlist. It's quite haunting and something a little different on there. We also have a wonderful piece. This is quite a moving piece by John Tavener called Mother of God, Here I Stand. So quite a mix
Brilliant.
there.
And then across the whole disc, you're going to be branching out into pop music as well that we can look forward to?
We're going all the way from early Renaissance polyphony right through to pop, exploring the theme of love.
Brilliant. And when are the rest of those albums going to be coming out?
We're going to get another one in October and then one in January, I think, or February. And then the release will be hopefully to coincide with Valentine's Day next year.
Okay, fantastic. We'll look forward to it. Now, the track we're going to play today is one that you've already mentioned, music by Guerrero. So would you like to just give us a little bit of information about the piece before we give that one a spin?
I think your pronunciation is better than mine, I'm sure.
It's one of those, he's one of those composers, I'm like, whenever it comes up, I'm like, I don't want to be the person that does the speech.
It's a tricky one for us English natives, I think. But it is an amazing piece, which we came across years ago, just in a search for a 5-part polyphony. It's quite an unusual one. It has a cantus firmus, which is a sort of repeating melody which goes throughout the piece, but unusually in this piece at this time it is actually in the top part, and this distinctive text is quite insistent. It means "Come, Lord, and do not delay," and it speaks of the Christian belief of God's redeeming love in the face of our human despair.
Wow. Okay. Well, it's strong stuff. And actually, one of the things I love about this recording is the amount of declamatory quality. We've spoken to so many choral directors as part of this Apple playlist show, and many people have spoken about the necessity to really sing the text and also let the voice out and let the singers really sing. And I think that you guys achieve that spectacularly in this. The declamatory quality is second to none. So let's give it a spin then. This is Venie Domini by Francisco Guerrero. Lots of people commenting there on the beauty of that singing from Apollo 5 and the commitment of that singing. Please you're all enjoying it. We've had a few questions about the ticket link, which I've now posted to Lullabies from the City. Donna says, please, does this mean that you're still going to be doing some stuff as part of your live from home? Absolutely we will be, Donna. We're probably going to take out the idea of doing a daily show that we've got a little bit more time to be working on looking towards the future, but we'll be bringing you at least 3, I think, events every week, so something to look forward to. We've also had a question, I think, from Rosalind saying, will it just be live or will we be able to watch it afterwards? Because Rosalind's from Australia and it's going to be 2 a.m. Over there when we are live in London. You will be able to watch it afterwards. So if you do buy a ticket, Rosalind, you'll be given a link and you can either use that to watch live or to watch at your convenience. So the ticket link is there pinned on the comments for you. So of course, we'd hugely appreciate your support with that. Now, my next guest is a great friend of VOCES8 because one of our members, Blake, is a former member of the American group Chanticleer. So we have a real connection and affinity with our American compatriots from that group. And Tim Keeler used to be a singer in the group, but he's now musical director-elect. And we're going to hear in just a minute probably Chanticleer's most famous piece. But first of all, I'm going to have a quick chat with Tim. Tim Keeler has joined me, musical director-elect for the fantastic American male voice group Chanticleer. Congratulations on your appointment, Tim. It wasn't that long ago that you were singing in the group, was it? So very, very nice to have you with us. And of course, actually, because you've been a singer, well, I suppose we can get insight from both sides of the fence. We're going to play the piece that probably Chanticleer is most famous for of all of your glorious recordings in a minute. That's Bibel's Ave Maria. But before that, perhaps you could just enlighten us a little bit about what becoming musical director of a group like that means for you, especially a group that's got a 40-year plus history. That must be quite a mantle to take on. So what sort of things are you having to do in order to take over that job?
Sure, there's a lot of responsibility and there's a lot of weight and a lot of expectations, and I'm doing my best to live up to those and not let them weigh me down too much. But one of the things that comes with it is retaining this sort of tradition that Chanticleer has built for itself, and that includes this Bibel, which I think has been performed at every Christmas concert that Chanticleer has sung since 1990. So then you think
that's a lot of Christmas concerts.
Yeah, I was just counting it up. I think it's around 750 or something like that. A lot. It's a lot. And
25 a year for 30 years.
Yeah.
Good maths you got there, Tim. Well done. You can see where they appointed you. And you can even count to 4, which is unusual for, I can say this, for counter tennis.
But, I'm happy to do that because most of the traditions that Chanticleer has are fantastic. And I am thrilled to uphold those, including listening to this song for however many more times I need to listen to it in my life. It's a gem. It really is.
Yeah. Now, when you go into the rehearsal room with Chanticleer, you can also answer this, I suppose, from the perspective as a singer. One of the things I think that the group is particularly well known for is the warmth in the sound, but also the sort of guts. I think the reason I love listening to your Bibel is because there's a feeling of guts and glory when you get up there to the climaxes. So in the rehearsal room, what are the sort of things that you focus on? Is that something you talk about? Is that something you consider as part of your brand that you really work on, or do you focus in other directions?
Well, I think one of the things that makes Chanticleer unique is it's 12 guys with very serious voices, and the sort of like massive sound you get when all 12 of the guys are giving 100% is fairly epic and
thrilling. I would say thrilling.
Really, yeah, and very unique. And so a lot of it is giving them the authority and the agency to really just sort of let go, and talk about all the details and make sure all the details are in place and everything is, all the edges are refined and everything like that. But then just sort of opening up and just letting the raw sort of power come through. That's what makes it really
quite interesting, because over the course of these 2 playlist shows, I've spoken to a number of directors, and the amount of times the theme has come up of empowering the singers is really interesting, because I would say I notice myself, sometimes in my own direction, but also sometimes in students, and it's quite prominent, can be quite prominent in the choral music industry, where the conductor tries to control the sound a little bit too much. But here we are, a number of very successful choral maestros standing up one after each other and saying, empower your singers. And that's very, very important. And for me, certainly clear.
I agree. We're not the ones, well, and I guess you're singing in your case, but generally as a conductor, you're just sort of in front of everybody in the way, and it's, and
You're not the first person that said that either. You do feel, I think you do feel in the way, don't you, sometimes? And that's coming at it with that mindset. Rather, one thing that I do think happens, and I find myself doing it sometimes too, is because you can feel a little bit superfluous as a director and in the way. And so one of the things that some directors do to get over that is they try and impose themselves on the choir. And I think that some of the, great choral directors are confident enough to actually not do that. So it sounds to me like you that Chanticleer are going to be very successful under your guidance.
Because it's not about the conductor. It's not even necessarily about the singers. It's about the music, right? And if you can just do whatever you can to make that happen, then that's the goal.
Yeah, I agree. So let's talk about the music. You've already mentioned it a little bit, that you guys have sung this piece a lot. I once heard, now you may or may not know the answer to this, I once heard that Biebel wrote this piece for a fireman's chorus. Is that, do you know that?
That may be true. I know that he composed it in the late 50s. I know that he was a church choir director. It may have been for a fireman's chorus. I'm not sure about that.
It sort of has that feeling of guts and glory about it, doesn't it? You can imagine the fireman going for it. But it also comes with, it's called Ave Maria, but then in brackets, Angelus, is it Angelus Domini?
Yeah.
And that's because of the toning as well. When we do it in VOCES8, we tend to just sing the first bit of the toning and then sing the piece top to bottom. But I think you guys do the whole thing with the repeats and the whole chanting as well, don't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, stretches it out for us, even more for us to enjoy.
Yeah, it certainly makes it even more epic. Because it's actually two texts. It's the Ave Maria text and then the Angelus, which is a separate prayer, and they sort of intersperse.
Exactly. Brilliant. Well, look, Tim, absolutely 100% best wishes for your taking over that coveted position. Congratulations on your appointment, and we look very much forward to hearing a CD. It sounds like you're coming at it with a mindset of freeing the singers, so we'll look forward to your first recording with them to hear the fruits of that. Hopefully your success is there. So thanks for joining us today, and here is Chanticleer's rendition of the Ave Maria by Franz Biebel. Angelus Domini, et concepit Spiritus Sancto. Ave Maria, The rousing voices of Chanticleer there with their famed performance of Franz Biebel's Ave Maria. Thanks very much to their new director, or soon-to-be new director-elect Tim Keeler. Tim actually joined myself and Blake on the Live From Home campaign a few weeks ago for an interview, and anybody who watched that will now know that Tim's had a very nice haircut. I complimented him on it off air actually, and he said it had taken him 3 hours to get it look. So it looks really, really good. I think it's probably high time that I consider what I might do with mine as well. So take a leaf out of Tim's book. We've actually had some really interesting observations on some of our chat threads about the term brand when referring to these choral groups. People saying, what is it that you're thinking about specifically with that? Well, I think that there's an element of each of the groups wanting to forge their own identity a little bit. And I think certainly from VOCES8's perspective, we would think about how we program, the types of sounds that we make. If you think if Chanticleer picked up a piece of polyphony compared to VOCES8 picking up a piece of polyphony, both groups might go about that slightly differently for a number of reasons. Of course, then the CDs we present, all that type of stuff, just trying to give ourselves a little bit of individual identity within the choral music sphere. Just like when you go to the supermarket, you could go down the whichever aisle you like and find lots of different products made by different people in slightly different ways. And so there's that element of consumer choice, and I think that that's very much the same in choral music. So, and as we all know, we associate that piece of Biebel with Chanticleer. It's very much tied to their brand. So that's the sort of stuff we're talking about when we think about that. Thank you for being in touch on the threads. Lots of interesting comments. People loving Chanticleer's performance. Many people saying they've been to see the group live. And of course, we certainly hope that you'll be able to get back out there to concerts sometime soon. In the meantime, we're thinking about digital concerts. We've got a ticket link up there on the thread for you to come and join us this coming week as we make our first foray into post-COVID streaming of concerts. Where 3 of us from VOCES8, myself, Andrew and Blake, are going to be meeting down at the VOCES8 Centre in London with Paul, my brother, to present you with a live concert event. So please come and support us by clicking on that link if you could. We'd be really grateful. Talking of Andrea, I've got in touch with her because the next track is a VOCES8 track, and I thought, quite frankly, you might be bored of me. I'm now joined by my super soprano colleague, Andrea. Thanks very much for coming on. Now, of course, we all know you for your wonderful bell-like soprano singing, which is definitely present in this track that we're going to play next. But you also made a little bit of a guest appearance. Would you like to tell us about that on a guest instrument?
Yes, it was my first appearance as an ocarina player on this piece, which some of you might already know from chatting a few weeks ago. But yes, I did an ocarina solo for the first time on this disc.
It's one of the things that's fun, isn't it, about doing music by Eric Sessenvaltz, is that I remember we recorded Stars on our Lux album, and that has the glasses. I actually came up on my Facebook memories. It's 6 years ago since we recorded that, because there's a picture of me tuning glasses with a pipette, sort of tuning fork in one.
That was so nice because we had all of our friends and family come in and play the glasses for us in that session. That was really lovely.
Yeah, I remember it very, very fondly. But his music is it's just very, very well written, isn't it? And I always feel when I hear a piece of Eric's, I can let myself just go into the score a bit like, when you get to one of those hotels on tour where the bed looks really comfy and you can just be like, I kind of find Eric's music a lot of the time like that. So yeah. Why don't you tell us a little bit, why don't you avail us of some information for The Long Road?
Well, it's one of my favourite pieces, absolutely, that we've recorded in the last few years. It's, as you were saying, Eric's music has this really sort of celestial quality to it. And it was written originally in Latvian and converted from a poem written by Paulina Bāda, who was the widow of a really famous Latvian poet. And she wrote it having lost her husband, about this kind of longing love of that your lifetime is never enough to really, really do justice to your partner and loved one like that. And apparently that she wrote the poem as if it was somebody you'd lost in war, and talking about how much you have to get through the rest of your life, thinking about you just didn't have enough time with that person. So it's really a hugely emotional piece, but also quite a spiritual piece as well, I think, and that kind of really comes through for me in that ocarina section, with all of the humming and the ocarina, and there's some bells and twinkling going on as well. And
twinkling, I did the twinkling.
Yeah.
I wouldn't call it playing so much though.
It kind of gives us I think that bit really gives us the window into the kind of the spiritual side of that, and kind of takes us away from that earthly poem that is so beautifully written. It just gives us this kind of state of the love that she's talking about is something so much more celestial and beautiful and spiritual, and it really gives us a window into that.
Great. Well, I definitely draw our listeners' attention as well to your sparkling descant lines, which I think you do in unison with Blake, don't you?
Yeah, there's one with you, I think, actually.
Oh, is there one with me? I was about to pay you a compliment, which maybe I shouldn't now, which is that I remember being pleasantly surprised at how little rehearsal those octaves took to get together. So kudos to you. The other thing our viewers might be aware of is that this piece actually is scored for more than 8 voices. So it's worth saying before we play it that we were in touch with Eric's about this, and he very kindly allowed us to have a go at making a new adaptation of it, which our baritone Chris Moore did. So Chris has kind of taken, I think it's originally 2 choirs, which are 4 voices, and then some solos on top. And Chris has done a beautiful job.
11 voices, isn't it?
Yeah, and he's done a very nice job, hasn't he, of adapting it down. So thank you very much for joining us today.
Pleasure.
Very nice to see you and your bangs. I think have you had any sort of haircut?
I cut them yesterday myself again. Yeah.
Okay. As you can see, I'm getting more and more in need by the day. It's when it sort of pokes out over the ears that I've got.
Yeah, that's when you know it's time, Bob.
It is time. Anyway, enough of that. Here is Eric Sessenbart's recording of The Long Road.
Lifetime was so short, so
Nice to see so many of you enjoying that VOCES8 track. Thank you very much. That comes from the third EP of the VOCES8 After Silence project. And just a reminder that next week, on Friday the 5th of June, I'm going to be launching the fourth and final disc as part of that album that we've been releasing over this whole 15th anniversary year. So be sure to tune in for that. It's going to be at 2 p.m. UK time on Friday the 5th of June. Thanks to Andrea. Many people saying how nice it is to see her. Hope you enjoyed not just her glorious singing, but also, yes, Roxanne, absolutely she is. So very, very nice to see and catch up with her. Now, our next piece is by an American choir, and actually they're a choir who I have a lot of time for, because not only do they have a magnificent performance history, they've been nominated for Grammys very recently, but also they are really dedicated to offering opportunities to young performers. It's very difficult when you finish your studies to find a place in professional choral music, finding your way into these choirs for the first time, and a group that helps with that is based on the east coast of America in Florida, and they are called Seraphic Fire. I'm now joined by Patrick Quigley, who is the artistic director and conductor of the fantastic American choir Seraphic Fire. Now, I know plenty of your music, Patrick, but perhaps for our European listeners, you might be able to give us a little introduction to your ensemble.
Absolutely. And Mari, thank you so much for having me here. I must say that VOCES8 is an incredible ensemble, and I have always been an admirer not only of your attention to detail and tuning, which is just fabulous, but also the entrepreneurial spirit of the group, which is really amazing. And I appreciate you all being a promoter of what we do as professional choral ensembles.
Thank you very much.
Seraphic Fire, we're a group of people, both singers and instrumentalists, who are incredibly committed to the idea of vocal music in the concert hall. So our programs run the gamut. We're not a specialist ensemble by any means. We perform music from, we have a disc of Hildegard of Bingen coming out soon, a new recording of her Ordo. But we've also recorded the Monteverdi Vespers and the Brahms Requiem and a few other things. But we're always looking for new ways to do things. I think that more than anything, Seraphic Fire is a workshop for sort of the top of what America has to offer in the choral singing, professional choral singing community. And we come together and try to perform music that our audiences don't know, but also that we don't know. So we're constantly going through new repertoire and new things. But that's sort of what our, yeah.
So if we had to pick one CD off the shelf to get to know Seraphic Fire by way of introduction, where would you point us? Which album do you think is the best shop window for you?
I mean,
I didn't prime you for that question.
No.
When someone asks me, it's like, having to choose between your children, isn't it?
It is. It's a very Solomonic choice at that point. I think that the disc that right now is most important to us is the Reincarnations disc, which is a recording of a number of American vocal pieces, all the way from shaker music to music that was written, a year or two before this disc, and that's it's been a mission of Seraphic Fire to more thoroughly propagate the music of American composers that write high quality music for voices. And this disc, Reincarnations, is the one where we feel that we've really put our best foot forward in that area. And the music on it, the composers on it are dear friends of mine, or idols, or people who have set the American sound for years. And so that disc is very, very important to us.
Go and check that out. Now, talking about putting your best foot forward, I know that you're also creating something new, which you've started during this lockdown period, a podcast perhaps?
Yes,
so we can all go and listen.
Do. We have released the first episode of the Seraphic Saturday podcast, sort of an introduction to who we are and the music that our musicians make outside of Seraphic Fire. We're made up of musicians who are primarily soloists for their living, and so many of them have some interesting new music and early music projects, and so we're featuring that. Our next podcast is scheduled to come out think the third Saturday in June, and we'll be exploring Messiah and Messiah's traversal of the Atlantic and how it got to the United States. So,
oh, no, that is interesting.
yeah.
Because, you know, I mean, we've obviously all know Messiah and love Messiah a lot, but I'm not sure I've ever come across it looked at through that specific magnifying glass. So third Saturday of June, I'm going to be watching out for it. Now, you are on our Choral Chill playlist performing a piece called The Earth Song. So maybe you would introduce that for us.
Sure. This is by an American composer named Frank Kelly. He is on faculty at the University of Southern California. He's written a large amount of music for wind band and for woodwinds, but has also written some really spectacular music for voices. His "There Will Be Rest" we recorded probably about 8 years ago on our first Christmas album that got a Grammy nomination. We returned to his music for this piece, Earth Song. To Kelly is sort of it's hard to really classify him as a school of composition, but he has a way of layering harmonies and tonalities on top of each other that create a mood for the text that he's setting. In this piece particularly, he plays a lot with the relationship of the minor second, particularly between the tonic and the leading tone. Mm-hmm. And that sort of tension is filled throughout the piece until we reach the point that music and singing, we talk about music and singing and how that will be our life and our comfort, and the tonality changes and we end up in a very static place by the end on the words peace. It is one of the more peaceful pieces that we have recorded. It's a journey, but it's a journey that happens in slow motion, and we really enjoy singing it, and our audiences have always enjoyed our performance of it. So I'm really glad that you're featuring it on the playlist. Thank you very much.
Well, I'm glad now you've given us such a compelling introduction. So thank you very much indeed. So can we say thank you to you for joining us all the way from the other side of the Atlantic, and let's have a listen to your glorious rendition of The Earth Song by Kelly. Gorgeous. The music of Frank de Kelly there. The Earth Song. Some people recognising that was recently released as a video by VOCES8. Absolutely correct. And it's also a track that's coming on our forthcoming EP Elemental as part of the After Silence project. So I'll be playing it again in a few days' time next Friday when I do my album launch show. Thanks very much for that rendition to Seraphic Fire and for all the work they do to support young people. Patrick was talking there about his new podcast that comes out on the third Saturday in June, where they're going to be examining Messiah. That sounds absolutely fascinating. So please go and check them out. Their website, seraphicfire.org. A reminder then that we are here celebrating the fact that VOCES8 has curated the Apple Music Choral Chill playlist that's currently up on Apple Music. So we're here sharing some of the highlights of that playlist and meeting some of the artists behind those recordings. I'm going to be putting a link to the playlist in the chat towards the end of this show, and also it'll be in the post if you want to come back afterwards so that you can link through and listen to all 50 tracks of sublime choral music that Apple Music have provided for us in that collection. Now my next guest is, I think, possibly the conductor who I've enjoyed singing for most in my whole life. He kind of has that annoying combination of being funny, intelligent, and good, so I'm also a little bit jealous. Let's meet Robert Hollingworth.
I'm now joined by director of I Fagiolini, Robert Hollingworth, to talk about a track that we've selected from their latest album, Leonardo, Shaping the Invisible. So fill us in, Robert.
This is a sensational piece. This is a piece, when we do this in concert, people always look up. They think, what's just changed? How come this is so much better than anything we've heard up until now? It's a piece cut from the very, very finest velvet cloth. Victoria has an extraordinary understanding of how to lay voices out so that they sound at their absolute best. He does a sort of call and response thing, or sometimes a call and response. So something is laid down in one choir, and then one of the voices moves just outside that. So you get a very gentle kaleidoscopic feel. And the text here, Alma Redemptoris, Hail Mother of the Redeemer, it's an Annunciation motet. It was part of our CD, Leonardo Shaping the Invisible. We attached to it, the Leonardo image of the Annunciation.
Okay.
The reason I joined it to this was not so much because it was Marian, but because of the quality of the cloth in the angel and Mary in this image, which we can show you. The folds of cloth. Leonardo was famous for this when he was very, very young. And it goes back to what I said at the beginning, the quality of the sound reminded me of the quality of cloth, the drapery, the way it falls, the way the light hits it. But if we can get our text sorted, it will then feed into part of a show we did in Australian circus company, Circa, in which we sang it as two 4-part groups separated by Billy, one of the acrobats, doing the most beautiful routine without a safety net in a Gothic cathedral on silks.
Okay, so we'll see that drifting in. Maybe the first half of the video we could see the original artwork that you were talking about, and then drift in that little bit of Circa towards the end. Well, brilliant. Well, thank you so much. It's very nice to see you, and we will now enjoy your beautiful art. This is Alma Redemptoris.
art in its most stunning form there. Thank you very much to Robert Hollingworth and Eve Faggiolini, not just for the great singing, but also for providing that wonderful footage. If you'd like to catch up with some other things that Robert is doing, he's very present at the moment on the internet. He has a fantastic series called Sing the Score. So go to YouTube and type in Sing the Score, and you're going to have the opportunity to learn a little bit about a piece from Robert, enjoy his very witty sense of humour, and then be able to sing with E. Faggiolini. So please go and check that out. And also, I interviewed Robert earlier this week as part of our Live from Home series, so you'll be able to find an hour of me chatting to him about his illustrious career, including some of his recordings. So plenty of content there for you to go and dig around in. Now, just a reminder, we're here celebrating the curation by VOCES8 of Apple Music's Choral Chill playlist, playing you some of the highlights of that. I'm going to put a link up to that at the end of the show, 50 choral tracks to hopefully send you into a spin or wherever it is that you need to go. Talking about being sent into a spin, he always did it to me when I was a little boy, beating me at every sport. It's my big brother, Paul. Can you see any family resemblance? This is my brother, Paul. Profile. I think maybe in the hair, if nothing else, considering
we've still both got some, which is nice, isn't it?
Yes. Paul and I, of course, co-founded VOCES8 together 15 years ago, and still very much work together. Obviously, I now sing in the group. Paul, you stopped singing about as many as 4 or 5 years ago now.
I think it was in 2016 that I hung up my singing boots with VOCES8 and transitioned to a new life.
And we are interviewing you today because you transitioned to a new life, which actually now sees you composing music. So we've heard a lot from you in this sort of Live from Home campaign about your creative music making, but I think I certainly would find it interesting to hear just briefly about how you found that transition. Do you think it's helped you being a singer now moving into writing vocal music, and what's that transition been like for you?
I'd say I still very much feel at the beginning of the journey of composition, but I think composition was something I've always been interested in, and as you know, in the group I kind of had an active interest in doing various bits and bobs whilst we were singing and doing everything else. But I think for me, one of the fun things about stepping away from VOCES8 as a singer was to get into the other different facets of choral music, and composing has certainly been one of those that's grown considerably over the last couple of years. It's been quite nice, of course, now and then to call upon this group called VOCES8 to actually help with some of those compositions. And as a composer, I think one of the things I found, certainly knowing what it's like to be a singer has been helpful, but also I love being able to test things out on singers and get their feedback. And there's nothing really more fun than to sit down with something you've written and then to have singers who you regard very highly give you their thoughts. And
you're very good. I mean, it must be said, you're very good at taking, should we call it, feedback?
Yeah, absolutely. But isn't that lovely? I mean, I think all composers out there would die to have a group like VOCES8 giving constructive feedback and helping them find a path for the piece to bring it to life. Because I mean, it's all well and good sitting down and writing something, but unless there's that collaboration with the people who actually take it onto the stage, I think you're missing a trick. So I feel very blessed in that side of things.
Now, one of the things I find fascinating about your music is I wouldn't say, I mean, it's interesting to hear you say that you feel you're only at the very beginning of your transition, because I think there is a hallmark to your writing, but you write across a really diverse range of, I suppose, instruments and textures. And I think that's quite evident. The piece we're going to play is the Nunc Dimittis, and I'd love you to talk a little bit about that for us. But it comes in a disc where that's an a cappella choral piece, but there's also electronic music and all that kind of stuff. So maybe you could just give us the sort of brief overview.
Sure. That's a lovely open question served by my brother.
You could talk for blooming England.
It's dangerous.
Don't, our listeners want to hear the music.
Yeah, quite. So Reflections was my first major recording project since leaving the group. And as I mentioned, it was nice to be able to call upon the group to sing a little bit, and also to get Apollo 5, our other ensemble, involved. But for me, yeah, I absolutely love exploring different textures. So it was great to work with a good friend, Neil Valentine, on electric viola, and to think about how we can build lots and lots of different layers. And across the album, we actually involved something like 2,500 singers, many of whom I think are watching this show today, and their choirs. So it's really, for me, that essence of singing is not just by yourself, but actually as part of a community. And so I wanted that to feed into the disc. But yes, I'm interested in all sorts of creative sound worlds, and I'd say I'm veering into all sorts of neoclassical experimentation at the moment. And it's just nice to have a little bit of time now that I'm not singing to actually play with those textures and to experiment. We come across so many great artists and great composers that we collaborate with in VOCES8, and to be able to learn from them and experiment with them sometimes is just a thrill. And so I'm working on things with prepared piano at the moment and electronics. And in fact, I've just stopped some work I'm doing on a film score to come and do some work with you at the moment.
Wow. I know about that one. It's embargoed.
I know.
Okay.
But yeah, so for me, of course, it's great to be able to experiment and to look at those different flavors, but it always comes back to the heart, I suppose, of me as a musician. Like you, we were formed at Westminster Abbey, and I think that sense of choral music is always going to sit deeply within my soul. And the Nunc Dimittis is very much the I suppose the center, the choral center of the album Reflections. In part because I think it's the most beautiful setting that you can that you can get. I think the evensong service itself is a beautiful thing, but within that, the Nunc Dimittis text is the most beautiful moment. And I wanted to write something. It was terrifying actually to approach that text because I revere it so highly. But to set something peaceful and intimate, as opposed to a Magnificat, was a real challenge. But I think you've just brought it to life beautifully. I'm very grateful.
You know, I mean, as you know, I'd be the last person ever to give you a compliment. You being my
it's tricky
brother, but I would say that I think it's incredibly effective, and you've really captured the poignancy of the work, and the way that you've set. Obviously, you understand the Latin text you're working with, and the way you've set that, I think, is spot on. For my money. So, and I wouldn't even say I'm biased. If anything, I'm biased the other way. I'm looking for an extra reason not to like. Anyway, Paul, look, thanks for coming on and talking to us about that. And we will now enjoy VOCES8 performing this in a church in Gubvilla is that now? That's
right. That's actually one of the projects we were supposed to be doing this very week, I think, in Gubvilla, and it's quite near Basel. It's in the Alsace region.
Okay.
And it's a beautiful setting. We hope to be going back there next year for another project, actually. In fact, that's going to include, I think, some Reflections music. But it's a great place and a great spot to hear VOCES8 sing.
So here then is Paul's Nunc Dimittis. Lots of people enjoying that. The Nunc Dimittis by my very talented older brother, Paul Smith. We're actually going to be premiering some new music by Paul in our Lullabies in Time and Space event that's coming up this coming Thursday. That's the 4th of June. It's the first time since lockdown began that we are getting some of us back together in a room to bring you a live streamed concert experience. So there are ticket links available in the threads, and we would really love your support with that event. It's our kind of first foray into what life might look like for us in terms of bringing music into your homes post COVID-19. So please, if you can, click that link and sign up for your ticket to that concert. Now, I think my next guest is somebody who I have had maybe my most memorable ever recording experience with, and that was all based around improvisation. I'm sure you'll know him. Thanks very much to Ola Gjeilo for joining me. I think you're the most represented composer potentially in this Choral Chill playlist with 4 tracks. And the track we're going to play is a collaboration between the two of us with your beautiful Ubi Caritas. And I know on that, we'll talk about it in a minute, I know that you improvised the piano part. It was a very magical session. And so just before we talk about the track itself, I wanted to just ask you a little bit about how you go about composing music, because I am aware that you have quite a background in jazz and play a lot of jazz piano, and obviously you're going to be improvising on the track that we're going to play. I wondered how much of a role improvisation plays in your writing. Are you the type of person who sits down at the piano, moodles around until you find something that you're happy to commit to and write down, or do you have a slightly different approach?
Yeah, slightly different. I usually yes, I always start with improvisation, kind of out of nothing, and I think that's partly because that's what I've always done on the piano from I was a little kid. I always just start with improvisation, and that's my favorite thing to do as a player, as a pianist, and. So usually I just improvise tons of ideas into software called Logic on my keyboard. So I kind of use sample libraries to have sounds that, are closer to what I'm actually writing for. And then, I just improvise a lot of ideas and then cut a lot of them out eventually, and just keeps the few that kind of light some kind of spark, and then I just keep developing those, and that kind of turns into the pieces. So
How long does that process take? Is it the kind of thing where you can sit down in one evening and improvise a few ideas and then develop 3 of them and be left with something that's, some sort of draft of a piece at the end? Or is it like you sit down, improvise for 3 days and then leave it for a month and come back to it? And how long is the timeline?
Either. I think it could be either of those or something in between. It varies a lot actually, and it depends a lot on the length of the commission as well. Sometimes it's the piece itself is almost exactly what I improvise. Mainly, especially in my piano music, in my most recent piano album called Night. Every piece on the album were started as a free improvisation in the studio, and then some of them I just kept them pretty much as they were and just wrote them down. And others I edited a lot, and so that's a really fun process.
Now, talking of editing, actually, I think probably the Ubi Caritas that we're going to play is maybe the least edited of any recording ever made by VOCES8. I'm not sure it's quite 1 track, but it might even be 1 long track, because the way that we ran the session, I remember it exceptionally vividly. We sing the piece a lot in concert, and we just stood there and sung it, and maybe we did it 5 or 6 times, and each time you just improvised on the keyboard. And the thing that struck me as being particularly amazing was each one of your improvisations was completely and utterly different. And the thing that kept us on our toes was that you were improvising a lot of the time in between the choral phrases. So we had to stand there and sort of listen to your improvisation and not quite knowing when we were going to need to come in with the next phrase, but always we got it right. And there was a very obvious ending to your improvisation sections, but it was absolutely incredible. And I think it's extremely effective. Because I know it's something you do a lot, isn't it? Improvising over your own music.
Yeah, I love doing that. I usually do that in most concerts I do with choirs. Yeah, it's just so fun because it's always different every time, and you never know I don't know what's gonna happen either. So so that's a fun way to make pieces that I have played for years kind of keep it interesting. Yeah, that session with you guys was one of the most fun things I've ever been part of, that recording session. And it was so great to do it with you guys because you're so flexible, so you could follow every little kind of detour and sort of flux in time. So that was really, really fun. And I think, yeah, we did 5 or 6.
5 or 6. I think you just picked your favorite in the end, or someone just.
Yeah, I think it was a whole take. Yeah. So we didn't do any mixing and matching.
There you go. This is bona fide or uncut. But just before you go, I want to ask you one more question, because something else I remember about that session was before we started each take, the producer would say, "Okay, we're ready." The red light would go on, and you'd be sat at the piano, and then there'd be like a pause of maybe 10, 20, even 30 seconds, whilst obviously you were collecting yourself. And I wondered, in that time, just before you're going to improvise, are you thinking, what am I going to do here? Are you thinking, oh my gosh, I'm not sure what I'm going to do here? Or are you just completely and utterly clearing the space?
Yeah, it's really just kind of just getting in the zone and sort of calming yourself, right? And then having it be quiet for a while, and I also try to empty my head as much as possible. I try not to think at all, really, and just let it be sort of instinct, so because the more sort of I think about it, the worse it's going to sound. So because then you get in your own way. But so I just sit and try to just wait for the first impulse that feels kind of right,
Gosh, well, I mean, I was amazed, I still am amazed, that you came out with 5 or 6 improvisations that were completely different. I think, we ought to, I'm just trying to remember who produced and engineered those sessions, because I would love to go back and find all 5 or 6 of the takes. They must exist somewhere. It'd be really nice.
I think I have them, actually.
You have them, do you? Okay, well,
I think so, yeah.
Okay. It'd be nice to listen back to them at some point. Well, look, Ola, thanks so much for joining us. We're going to play then your Ubi Caritas from your eponymous album. You're cool enough to have an eponymous album. I'm not that cool. Your album called Ola, and this is the Ubi Caritas, as I say, with us singing and you doing your magical improvisations on the keyboard. So take care and see you soon.
Thanks so much. Great to see you.
A one-take wonder there. Gosh, what a magical session it was. Ubi Caritas by Ola Gjeilo, featuring Ola himself playing that fantastic improvisation. You know, now I come to think of it, we didn't just do the 6 takes in that session. We also did a tour around the US with Ola. I think the year after that was recorded. And again, every night we did it and it was completely and utterly different. So really true invention, true genius, actually. That's absolutely magnificent. So thank you very much to Ola for joining us, and thank you very much to you all for joining us as well. We've just crossed the 2-hour mark of this stream, and many of you still here going strong. I've just got a couple of tracks left to play here. I'm here celebrating the fact that VOCES8 has curated the Apple Music Choral Chill playlist, a selection of 50 tracks that will hopefully lull you into wherever it is that you need to go with beautiful choral music. Now, talking about coming the distance for the full 2 hours, another group of people who've come a spectacular distance are a student choir who I'm going to feature next from Portland State University. They're also, of course, quite a distance away. And I caught up from London, 8 hours, I think, the time zone difference. And I caught up with their director, Ethan Sperry. Joining me now is Ethan Sperry, the director of the Portland State Chamber Choir, coming from a number of time zones away. I suppose that'll be 8 time zones away, would it, over in Portland, Oregon? So it's
out in the Pacific. Thanks for having us on.
Absolute pleasure. Well, I mean, you guys have caused quite a stir in choral music in the past few years. I think you're the only student ensemble or collegiate ensemble that's forming part of this Choral Chill playlist. Certainly the show that we're doing, I think that puts you in quite a unique position amongst all the directors I've spoken to. So perhaps
we are honored. Thank you.
Well, it's a pleasure. And perhaps first you could let us know just a little bit about yourself as a director. Have you always been in sort of teaching, or how have you come to be where you are today?
Yeah, right after college, I went straight into a job teaching junior high and high school music in Boston. And after that, I got a master's and a doctorate in choral conducting at University of Southern California. I also taught community college while I was doing that. And after that, I was a choir director at Miami University in Ohio for 10 years. And now this is my 10th year at Portland State University. So this is my 20th year as a university choir director.
Goodness me. It's amazing, isn't it, how many incredible choral musicians have been through the University of Southern California. So another illustrious name to add to that list. I would love to ask you a little bit about how you train your students, because recording is, well, I think quite a difficult thing to do. And of course, everyone else we've spoken to on this program is working with professional singers. So when you're talking about getting a student choir through this sort of process in order to achieve these incredible artistic standards that you do, what are some of the challenges that you face and have to overcome?
Well, I'd actually like to go the other way around. The recording itself is the training. It's the best possible training experience I can give my students. And I'm really fortunate. I work with a producer named Eric White, who's one of the founders of Cantus, if you've heard of that professional group from the United States. And he now directs Corleone. He's the one who introduced me to this process, and he's produced all of our albums since the first one. And this is the process of training them to be professional singers or to be choir directors, to take the music up to sort of concert level, which we do. We perform everything before we go into the sessions. And then we already have the music at that level, and then we're able to spend a tremendous amount of time further, pushing further down the road, honing our ears to hear the differences between those slight nuances. But unlike a concert, I mean, you never hit every mark you set in rehearsal in a concert. In fact, that can't even really be the goal. That drives you nuts in a concert. And in a concert, it's got to be about pure expression. But you know, if you can hit the mark just once in the sessions, it's going to be preserved forever. It's this amazing goal. And I've watched through the choir. We don't do a lot of recording tricks. We're mainly doing a lot of editing. So we do a lot of takes, and we can splice together quite quickly, little bits and pieces of the best takes. When we can hear that next level of how the choir is singing, that level, if we were just a little more consistent, it becomes so much easier to replicate. I've recommended to a lot of my friends, I think a professional level recording process is something more student choirs should do, because it's how we do the training.
150% agree. I honestly feel a bit silly for asking the question, I suppose, but I couldn't have thought of a better answer myself. And it's something that, I mean, even, you talk about it being a great training thing. It is, I think, at any level. And in VOCES8, you know, especially with the younger singers group, the newer singers, until you've done like 5 or 10 discs, I mean, well, we learn all the time, don't we? But really, it's the best way to get feedback as well. I think the other thing that's really nice about it from the perspective of your students is, of course, they actually have a keepsake of not just something that shows they went to college in a choir, but something that they can be proud of and show to their kids, grandkids, and say, look, I actually was in a group that was singing at this professional level. So what lucky students they are. And I would echo your words absolutely about more choral programs taking their students to that high level. I mean, talking about students at a high level, we're going to play a track by Erik Sessenvalds today, O Salutaris Hostia, which I'd love you to talk about. But one of the things that struck me when I listened to it was the quality of not just the choral singing, but the quality of the soloist in this particular track. I wanted to, maybe you could touch on that also when you introduce the track for us now before we play it.
Sure. So the soloists are 2 students in the choir. Kate Leddington is a master's student in the choral conducting program, so she's studying to be a choir director. And Maeve Steer is an undergraduate. She's a senior in the vocal performance program. We have a great opera program at Portland State University. And so most of the students in the choir are actually studying to be choir directors. They're music education majors as undergrads or master's students in conducting. And then the second largest set are actually vocal performance majors. They're hoping for a career in classical voice or as classical voice teachers. So I do consider it a pre-professional program. I'm trying to train people to have careers in music. And so there are a few non-music majors, but very few in the group. We have a few composition majors, jazz majors, and even a couple of instrumental majors who just also sing really wonderfully and read music. But the bulk of the choir is really aiming for this kind of career. O Salutaris Hostia, for me, I have a very personal feeling about this piece. One of the things I really love about Erik Sessenvalds is his take on Christianity. And I say this, I'm Jewish, although a highly non-religious Jew. In fact, the hashtag I use the most on Facebook is bad Jew. But Erik's grew up in Latvia when it was occupied by the Soviet Union. And religion was something he could not experience as a young person. And it's a conscious decision he made as a teenager to become a Christian. And so I find his take on so many of these Christian texts is somebody coming to it with a grown-up decision instead of sort of childhood dogma fed to them. And so he takes these texts in a very different light. And he also takes it in the light of the Latvian people, these people that have been oppressed for centuries. In America especially, we pay so much attention, as we should, to the oppression of Blacks and Native Americans. But in other parts of the world, white people are oppressed just as much by other white people. And the Latvians are a culture that was suppressed for centuries. And to me, you hear in this prayer for peace, in O Salutaris Hostia, this longing for resolution in the music. It's so beautiful, and you can always hear this cadence that's right around the corner that never arrives. It's this exercise in elision that goes on and on and on, and the beauty keeps growing, but it's like you can see it's right there, and he gives us the result that he's had in his own life. Finally, at the end of the piece, it resolves. But I know very few pieces like this that manage to keep the intensity going in one direction like that. And I think it comes out of that history. It's a really exquisite thing.
Thank you very much. It's a very thought-provoking introduction. And I think the other thing that's incredibly inspiring about speaking to you is the fact, obviously, that you're doing this with students and showing us all what we can expect of young people, and also showing us what we should be trying to get out of young people when we ourselves are teaching, which, of course, we do as a group a lot. And of course, alongside that, you're also showing us that the future of choral music is very much in good hands. And at a time like this, it's really nice to have that sort of positive message. So thank you very much for everything you're doing, and congratulations on all the awards you're winning for these CDs. Very, very richly deserved. And
you're so welcome.
We will look forward to hearing more of the choir. I suppose, your choir changes every academic year, doesn't it? So we can.
That's right. I use it. It's about half of the members that turn over every year.
Wow, that's incredible. I salute you. Yeah. Creating a new ensemble.
Thanks. Can I add a personal tag?
Absolutely can.
On behalf of my students especially, thank you. I mean, all of us are huge VOCES8 fans, and you're some of the models we are listening to. And part of the reason we're able to do what we do with the students is because we have models like you, and especially VOCES8's commitment to recording. It's really important. And you've got to know how far-reaching that is. And it is one of the reasons that this disc exists, is we've been listening to you.
Thank you very much indeed. Well, that means a lot to us. And obviously, you know, one thing that we try to do with our music is inspire. And of course, that's inspire the people who consume it. But we set up a foundation when we started the group because we wanted to encourage everybody to sing. And so to hear that students who are operating at such a high level of benefiting from that means a lot to us. So thank you very much. And we will now we will bathe ourselves in the beauty of your choral sounds. This is O Salutaris Hostia by Eric Eschenwalds, sung by the Portland State Chamber Choir with Ethan. Thank you. What a piece, and what a performance there by the Portland State Chamber Choir. conducted by Ethan Sperry, two absolutely marvellous soloists. I must apologise to Ethan because during that interview I forgot to put up his name. It's Ethan Sperry, Director of the Choral Arts Programme at Portland State. And I actually have had a very interesting conversation with Ethan about some very exciting plans he's got for making sure that his students can get together this academic year and do some singing. So we wish him all the very best with that. Now we are coming towards the end of our stream today. A reminder that we've been here celebrating the fact that VOCES8 has curated the Apple Music Choral Chill playlist, which you can find on Apple Music. I'll be putting links up at the end of the show. It's been my absolute pleasure to be with you for, wow, over 2 hours today. So I hope you've enjoyed it, and thank you very much for staying through with me all this time. Before I go, just a reminder that starting next week, we are going to be beginning to bring you live events with hopefully some music happening with a few of us all together in one space as we build towards our ensemble, and of course ensembles all around the world being able to sing together in the same room again after this lockdown period. So I'm going to be putting a ticket link up for an event that we're doing this coming Thursday, the 4th of June. I can put up the schedule for the whole week for us. You can see there on the 4th of June we have the Lullabies in Space and Time. Then on Friday the 5th of June I'm going to be launching the final chapter of VOCES8 After Silence album. That's going to be called Elemental. There'll be a launch show there on Friday the 5th of June. Then on Sunday the 7th of June we are completing our Singing Brussels programme with that celebration event. Again, hopefully hosted live with more than one of us in the room. Anything you can do to support our endeavours as we begin to look towards post-lockdown life would be hugely appreciated. So there is a ticket link. If you had a chance to click that and come and support us, we'd be hugely grateful. If you can't do that, perhaps you could send us some stars on Facebook or some super chats on YouTube if you've been enjoying our work and enjoying this stream. I certainly have been enjoying spending time with you. I've been loving bathing in the beauty of all of this music and of course speaking to so many wonderful friends and colleagues from the choral music industry. So thank you very much to Apple Music for supporting our work and for being such great partners. And thank you very much to you all for spending so long with me over these past couple of days. I look forward to seeing you next week. And I'm going to leave you with a track which I hope you will all like. I know it's a favourite of many people's. It's the music of Arvo Pärt and it's VOCES8 singing The Deer's Cry. Bye-bye.